So welcome to hashtag Salem MA, part of our 2021 What's the Story series. Stories are at the core of what we do here at the House of the Seven Gables. They are not just a part of our past, but they're a part of what we do today and a part of our future as well. This year, we're really excited to be exploring the lore and stories of our historic site and surrounding community. And we felt that by inviting Purely Salem, Hello Salem, and Frost Stove, it was really kind of the perfect way to get inspired by the beauty of the place that we call home. Before we introduce our speakers and kind of start our show and tell tonight, I wanted to share a little bit about our story at the House of the Seven Gables. We have a lot of new faces joining us tonight and a lot of people from around the country. So whether you are from the historic Derby Street neighborhood or you are from the great state of Utah or Montana, we are so happy to have you joining us tonight to hopefully also get inspired by a little bit of Salem and the House of the Seven Gables as well. So our organization was founded by Caroline Emerton. She purchased this famed mansion in 1908, restored it, and opened it as a museum in 1910. And she used the proceeds from museum visitors to open up a settle house here in the historic Derby Street neighborhood. And that settlement house at the time welcomed immigrants into Salem and offered a variety of educational opportunities to help them literally settle into American life. Today, our organization continues both our historic preservation efforts here at the House of the Seven Gables and also our education throughout our community. We have resumed our in-person ESL and citizenship classes. We are working in partnership with 10 other museums from around the country on a community resiliency project. And thanks to the Cummings Foundation, we just found out that we have received grant funding to support an education manager who will be handling a lot of these community programs. So a lot of great things are happening at the House of the Seven Gables right now. And we are so delighted to share happy news after a year of, a little bit of chaos and, not always great news for everybody. So really great to have wonderful things happening here in Salem. The first person who we will have speaking with us tonight is Ty Hapworth, who is the person behind Hello Salem. So hi, Ty. You are welcome to share your screen when you're ready, and we are all excited to hear from you.
Thank you, Julie. Let me just start the screen share here. Can you all see that? So first I want to just start and thank Julie and thank the House of Seven Gables. I've personally always been impressed with the House of Seven Gables and their mission, and I think that mission is just to tell Salem's history, and the history of Salem is not just an old house and wealthy sea captains. It's an immigrant story, and I think that it's such a unique thing that the House of Seven Gables does, supporting our immigrant community here in Salem. So just want to appreciate them and want to appreciate everyone who tuned in here, whether you're my neighbor or you're from, I think she said Utah, Montana. We had a couple guests coming in from across the country. So appreciate all of you supporting the House of Seven Gables mission. What I wanted to talk about is within my photography is Salem it's 8 square miles, and I think if you've been here, you've probably taken the same pictures that Amelia has taken, that Matt has taken, that I've taken, and it can be very difficult to find something new and something interesting, especially when you're focused very specifically on a city that's a tiny little peninsula off the coast of Massachusetts. So I wanted to focus on how I find, at least from me personally, how I find interesting things to take photographs of, or interesting angles on a photo, and just talk through some of those elements within my photography. So the first one is unique perspective, and this is I think there's something rewarding to seeing a photograph of something that you've seen before, but when it feels a little bit strange or alien because it's taken either from a different context that you haven't seen it in, or it's taken where I'm literally laying on the ground taking a picture of something focused upwards. You see this actually in Matt's photography, where he finds puddles and takes pictures with puddles. There's just very interesting things that you can do around perspective to either tell the story of a building or just to present something in a way that makes it feel interesting or different. And the first one here is, this may not be everyone's favorite. This is one of my favorites. This is a picture that actually hangs in my hallway in my house. It's a building that looks very familiar. It's the Pickering storehouse out on Derby Wharf. But I think when people look at it for the first time, they see it and they think, what am I looking at right now? What is this? And it's a picture that I've taken many times, but I flipped it and rotated it, so you're seeing the reflection on top and the actual photograph on the bottom. And I think that, anything that makes people stop and look at a picture and wonder what they're seeing or what this is, makes a picture more interesting and more unique. And by the way, the Piedrick Storehouse is a great building just for photographers in general, because it has that beautiful sunrise that happens behind it. The sunset happens in front of it and sort of shines that interesting light on it, and it's surrounded by water. And by the way, there's no cars in the photo ever at the sail loft, so there's always a great photograph there. The second one is actually right across the street from my house here. It's the Andrew Safford house. And I think one of the most interesting elements of this building is those 3-story tall columns that happen on the side of the house there. I don't think there's another building in Salem that has that in its architecture. And I think it's very unique, and it looks impressive, and it sort of elongates the building no matter how you look at it. But taking the photograph from a lower angle, I think, accentuates that even more and highlights that even more. And looking at sort of the wrought iron gate that's in front of it, and the vertical elements that are in that gate, and sort of that, I don't know, Tim Burton-esque looking sort of squigglies that happen on those posts, I think sort of accentuates the building in a very interesting way, and the vertical elements in the building in an interesting way. And the sunrise behind it doesn't help either, or doesn't hurt either. The next one here is, I don't actually take that many photos of the witch house. I think it's probably the most photographed building in Salem. But it's, for me at least, notoriously difficult to photograph that building. There's, like I mentioned earlier with cars, there's always cars in front of that building. It's on a busy street corner. There's a stoplight there, so there's always cars parked around the building. There's always sort of tourists milling about. And it's also, if you're right next to the building, it's difficult to get. You can get a great photograph in front of the building, in front of the door. But as far as photographing the entire building, I've always found that to be very difficult, because you have sort of limited space to work with there. So for this photograph, I actually stepped all the way back there's a little square on the corner of Summer and Essex, and stepped back there. There was a beautiful sunset happening that night. I think the sky, sort of looking at the building from the bottom of the building up, and having the majority of the photo be sky, I think frames the building in a really interesting way. And then having that tree sort of menacingly hanging over the top of it, and looking very out of scale for the building, I think adds a little bit more interest to the photo. And I rarely take a picture of the witch house, but I think this one was one that I was really appreciated. The next element is one that I probably pride myself in the most, and these are probably my least liked photos sometimes, but I think that I pride myself in finding overlooked beauty in a city like Salem. So who I go out running every single day, I've taken thousands upon thousands of pictures. I see interesting and new things in buildings that, we all probably walk by and we don't notice. So I think highlighting those things and seeing those things in a new way is something that I tend to pride myself on. The first one is a building that it was once Salem's post office. And I think even people who maybe grew up in Salem and have lived here their whole life probably walk by this thing every day and drive by this every day and don't even realize they're looking at the old post office. And maybe not a building that's all that impressive day to day. I think there's always traffic, there's always people going by. But if you get there at the right time in the morning, it's got this really interesting yellow, orange, golden glow that happens on the building. And I think that that sunrise brings out a lot of the architectural elements in the building that make it all the more interesting. There's the beautiful cornice on the top, the United States Post Office written on the top there, the pilasters on the side there. A lot of really interesting classical elements that you wouldn't see in a downtown building that was constructed today, but when it was built, it was something that people included these elements of beauty in buildings. And I think you see it more when you see it early in the morning. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out Gagnon Shoe Repair at the bottom there, which unfortunately we no longer have in Salem. It's recently moved out, but was the last cobbler left in the city of Salem, and had an adorable shop kitty that used to sit in that window that we would see every morning. And so this one is a building that maybe is photographed, but I think it's frequently photographed in a different context and a different light. This is one of the old courthouses in Salem. It's the old Registry of Deeds, and typically you see this photographed because this is, if you're familiar with the city of Salem, there's all of our, we tend to build, we actually have always built all of our courthouses in a row. So from 400 years ago to today, our courthouses have generally been in the same sort of part of the city, and they tend to get built right next to each other down the street. And I think that's a really compelling way to take that photo, but this one is actually taken back a little bit in I guess sort of an alleyway, or probably on somebody's private property, actually, now that I look at it. But I think what I like about this building is that it's something that we wouldn't build today. It's there was a time in American history when we we were sort of looking at a more classical style in our buildings, or at least in our public buildings. And this building is, it's beautiful and it's dramatic, but it's maybe not unique to Salem. You see things like this throughout the East Coast. But what you typically see is, you see these things, architects would site them in front of a large plaza somewhere so that you could gaze upon the building and you could see it all. And in Salem, we don't have that kind of space. We are a very dense city. And this, to me, it looks more like something you would see in Rome, where you've got these working class houses sort of surrounding this temple-like building rising out of it. And I think taking it from this angle where you're standing a little further back adds just an interesting element to the photo. And then as far as overlooked beauty, I don't think our graveyards are overlooked at all in terms of the way tourists interact with them, but I think they don't interact with them as if they were beautiful spaces, unfortunately, sometimes. And I think people use it. It's creepy. It's Halloween time. We go take a picture in the graveyard and move on. But our graveyards are filled with Puritan funerary art. It's there wasn't much art produced in 17th century Salem, but it was being produced by stone carvers, and their work is still sitting there out in the elements that you can view any day you go out there. And this is, I think, the Timothy Lindahl stone, which is one of the more beautiful ones that you see in the cemetery. And I think just looking at it and stepping back and taking it from this angle where you don't see the whole stone, I think there's a tendency when you see a gravestone to want to read it and see what date it was and who the person was and if there's anything interesting written on it. And cropping it this way, you can sort of just see the artwork of the stone carver, which is creepy, but it's also beautiful at the same time. Along the same lines, another gravestone. I mentioned the Puritan sort of elements there of the memento mori, the winged skull, but also what's written on this one. And I think maybe a lot of people have seen this. This is one of the more well-known stones in Salem, but I think just seeing the way it's written, where it says an aged person that's seen but 19 winters in this world. So this is a 19-year-old boy who, if you know the way Puritans thought of old age, it was something they respected. So they called him an aged person who had seen but 19 winters. I think there's something, tragic, but also beautiful in the way that was inscribed. And I don't think we think of Puritans as being especially sentimental, but they were clearly sentimental when they wrote this about Nathaniel Mather. And then the last element is the easiest one. It's dramatic light. It's Salem's a peninsula, so we get beautiful sunrises, beautiful sunsets, and every picture, if you're willing to wake up early in the morning, every picture looks better in dramatic sunlight. And this is an easy one for anyone. I mean, I think this is, if Matt or Amelia take this picture, it's got 20,000 likes on it probably. If I take it, I probably get 1,000 likes on it. But it's a picture that is not only popular with Halloween enthusiasts. This is the Hocus Pocus house, by the way. But it's just a beautiful house. Bryant Tolles wrote in his Architecture of Salem that takes a lot of elements of Victorian and 19th century architecture and jams them into this tiny little one-story building. It's got a beautiful mansard roof. It's got some Italianate elements in it. And it's sited right on the water there. It's got a beautiful sunrise that happens behind it. If you get there at the right time of day, there's no cars parked around it, which is clearly an element that is important to me. And if you get there at the right time of year, there's not tourists around it. It's a great building, and it's always popular with people who love Salem. And this is back to Derby Wharf. This is I frequently, if there's a beautiful sunrise happening, I will head out to Derby Wharf because I know that the picture is going to look great anytime I get out there. But what I really like about this particular shot is that the buildings that are in here at the skyline are, red brick, yellow. There's some elements of yellow in the ship there, and I think it's just very warm colors along the horizon. And then you see the sunrise and the sunset always has these warm tones that happen in the middle there. And then it's right on the water there, so you've got the blue sky above and the blue water below, and it adds this interesting stripe of warm colors with bracketed by cool colors on either side. And I think it just always makes for a very interesting photograph. And then Julie said we had to include the House of Seven Gables. That was a required element in here, and I've actually taken many pictures of it. I saved this one for the end. I think this is actually from one of the House of Seven Gables early outreach efforts they had to the Instagram community. I think 2 years ago, there was a small Instagram meetup that happened at the House of Seven Gables where we walked around, had an insider tour of the house, and took some photographs. But this was, I walked around the outside and they had those doors open, and I think that studded door with the colors that happened on it and that beautiful sunset that was happening behind it just added a very interesting and dramatic element to a picture of the House of Seven Gables that you don't typically see. And this is actually another one that I've has had framed and hanging on my walls for a very long time. And I think that's my last. That's my last photo. Actually, I think we're saving questions for the end.
That's great. Thank you, Ty. Those are wonderful. So yes, we definitely encourage, you are welcome to put any questions into the chat that you'd like to, but like I said, we'll have a little bit more time for Q&A towards the end of our talk. But we will move on to Amelia, who is better known as Frost Oath on Instagram, and a very different look and very different aesthetic than Ty and Hello Salem, but we're really excited to share the many, many ways you could take a look at Salem.
Yep, so this was actually very difficult to try to choose only 10 images of Salem. As I'm sure everyone knows, there's so much to see here. There are so many different elements to Salem. You have your downtown shopping dining district, you have your historical landmarks, you have ocean, beaches, boardwalks, you have woods, parks, all different elements. I tend to focus more on architecture, nature, definitely cemeteries. So I'm going to pull up my slides here. Okay, so I'm jumping right into it. This first slide is of the House of the Seven Gables. This is taken from the courtyard garden area. I just really, as Ty was saying, I really like to try to take, like I do take photos from straight on sometimes, but then you also play with angles to sort of give you this feeling that you're in a different world, or that you're not completely surrounded by like a downtown area or other houses. I think winter in Salem is particularly beautiful. The snow just adds such a magical element. And I think this really showcases it. I love the little lantern in the front. It's sort of like old village feeling. So I just really enjoy all seasons in Salem, but winter is particularly magical. And in this next slide, we have, again, I love architecture. I studied architectural elements. I went to Salem State University and I sort of fell in love with it there. So this is the Pickering house on Broad Street. It's one of the oldest buildings in Salem.
Amelia, I accidentally muted you. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, my apologies.
Okay, am I back
Sorry.
in?
You are back in. I apologize.
No.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. So going back to here, so this is a very old building, built the Pickering house, built in the 1600s. It was sort of given this sort of Gothic makeover on the facade. It's a very interesting building. It's often photographed straight on from the front, which is sort of this kind of opposing building, very imposing building. I wanted to get it from a different angle so you can sort of see just that the interesting elements sort of wrap around the entire building. You've got a little lean-to in the back. I really like to photograph buildings, especially in winter and fall, because you don't have as much foliage and trees blocking the view. Just sort of a moody photograph here. Moving on, this is another one of my favorite buildings in Salem. This is the Graymore, also known as the Putnam Balch House. This is a Victorian style house, specifically Second Empire style, very detailed, very ornate. I really liked having the sort of springtime element of these trees blooming. So it adds like a beautiful element without blocking the view of the house. As Ty was mentioning, it's very difficult to get a photo of a house or building in Salem because there's always cars parked on the street. And especially a lot of the houses are right up against the sidewalk. So you can't really back up to get that shot. So you kind of have to be sneaky. You have to keep going back to the same spots over and over to get the shot that you want. I'm going to try to zoom in on this a little bit. There's a little horse hitching post in the bottom right corner. It sort of looks like a stump wrapped with ivy leaves. I thought that was interesting that that's still intact. So again, very impressive, massive building. So again, elements of nature, architecture, and favorite season, fall, specifically around Halloween time. We have the Pioneer Village in Salem. It's located in Forest River Park, and I believe it was America's first living history museum. And they sort of were trying to recreate the first instances of buildings in Massachusetts. There was a blacksmith, they have herb gardens. It definitely feels like when they're open for tours, it feels like you are in a different time period. It's very authentic, otherworldly, beautiful with fall foliage. When you do take a tour of the space, you're able to see the interior of some of the buildings as well. Very interesting. Again, going with a fall theme, we have a beautiful doorway with really nice Halloween decorations. But seeing how people decorate their houses in the fall is really enjoyable. People can get really creative, but also I know that Ty likes to take photographs of a lot of doorways as well, because it's something that might be overlooked. Each house has a very unique entrance. When I first moved to Salem in 2004, I noticed in a lot of the gift shops, there was this poster called Doors of Salem. That poster is by Paula and Mark Keene. They printed it in 1998. And that sort of made me realize, like, oh, that's something.
Amelia, I'm so sorry I did it again, letting somebody in from the waiting room. So you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear
I'm
me
so
now?
sorry. I'm gonna let just Kaylee do her end of that, and I'm gonna stop touching things.
No problem. I'm glad that you're alerting me to it. But what I was saying about this photograph, you sort of have the elements of this old house entrance, as well as I love the brick sidewalks with the fall leaves on it. Again, Salem is such a unique place, and it really can feel like you're in a different world when you're visiting here. And again, I'm going to talk about the poster that was printed in 1998 called Doors of Salem by Paula and Mark Keene. That sort of drew my interest into photographing doorways in Salem. And then again, this is the full gravestone that Ty just showed, that little piece with the skeleton in it. So this gravestone, this front gravestone, this is in the Burying Point Cemetery. It's also known as Charter Street Cemetery. It is one of the oldest cemeteries in the US. It has some great examples, again, of the Puritan art on gravestones, memento mori, more so reminders that everyone is going to die. It's a little bit more bleak, but still, when you visit this cemetery, it's easy to overlook the individual artwork on these stones. And in this particular grouping, you can see there's a winged skull in the background, and in this front stone, you see on the left is the skeleton, which represents death, and on the right, there's Father Time. But it is beautiful when you take the time to sort of look at each individual stone. They're so unique. Salem has at least 8 different cemeteries, at least ones that are marked. So this is one of the very first ones. So it leads me to my next slide, which is of Harmony Grove Cemetery. Now this is a huge contrast because Harmony Grove, it was founded in 1840 as opposed to the Burying Point, which was 1600s. This is when sort of rural and garden style cemeteries were coming into fashion. There weren't really any public parks at the time, so they were designing these cemeteries to sort of be park-like, to have trees, to have landscaping, to be in a very beautiful open setting. So loved ones had a beautiful place to go where they could visit. Actually, the very first garden style cemetery is Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That one came out a little bit before they did this one. Again, I really love the fall colors here, especially since this cemetery has so many trees in it. You're going to get a lot of foliage here. So I definitely recommend visiting this cemetery in the fall time. And it's really big, so give yourself some time to walk around. This photograph is so this is actually behind the Ropes Mansion, which was Allison's house in Hocus Pocus. This garden was built in 1912, and it's very beautiful when it's in full bloom. I think we're starting to get there now. It is open to the public, so if you are visiting the Ropes Mansion, you can just go right on back and check out the garden. I got sort of a different angle here, so it might not be recognizable right away. I just sort of liked sort of more wild looking in this photograph. Overcast sky, you can really see the building in the back is overgrown with ivy. The trees are sort of looming over. It looks very lush and full here. I definitely recommend checking that out. So this is actually a building that was designed by Samuel McIntyre, who was a popular Salem architect. There's actually a whole district dedicated to houses that he's worked on, has designed. So that's the McIntyre district, a very beautiful area. I wanted to sort of get a different angle on this house. This is from the garden area looking up at the house. That way you can't really see all the things that are going on in the background, because I think there's just a parking lot behind it. It's so detailed, and it's just a one-room building. So this is a building that the owners would have had their afternoon tea in, or a light meal. But to see such detailed ornaments on this building, And again, it's another thing that's overlooked because it's sort of set back from the street. It's facing away from the street. It's sort of in this garden backyard area. And it looks really nice with these red flowers. And this is my final slide. Again, we're at the House of Seven Gables on a gloomy day. I think it just really makes everything pop. I love that you can see the old bricks in the sidewalk. And this window actually belongs to, there's a room in the House of Seven Gables called the Scent Shop. The building didn't originally have this sort of shop area. When the building was being restored to open it up for tours, they sort of added this room to reflect Nathaniel Hawthorne's story, The House of the Seven Gables. And I think that's just sort of to add an attractive quality for people when they're taking the tour of the house. So that's the final slide. All right, and we're back.
That's so great, Amelia. Thank you. And you did a wonderful job talking about the scent shop. So just in case you ever wanted to come and join us as a guide, we would love to have you. Ty as well. We'll see if Matt can live up to the, Matt and Purely Salem can live up to the skills of Ty and Amelia in terms of talking about the House of the Seven Gables.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes. So Matt, you are up next, my friend.
All right, let me see. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, everybody. So my name is Matt. Thanks, Julie, and for the House of Seven Gables for getting us together here today to talk about Salem and to talk about kind of our art in terms of capturing Salem. I wasn't actually born in Salem. I come from Lynn, which is right next door. So I actually did spend a lot of time in Salem when I was a kid. I went to Salem Willows and we did shopping downtown. So I've always had an appreciation for Salem, but I didn't live here or I didn't move here until 2004, which I guess is the same year that Amelia moved here. And since that time, I've really grown to love it even more. It's actually evolved quite a bit and I just love living here. So it's a little bit about me. The next slide. So this picture, actually, that I'm starting out with was not a Purely Salem picture. This was a picture on my personal page. And the reason that I'm mentioning it is because it's kind of part of the reason why I created Purely Salem. So actually, like I said, I've lived here since 2004, but for a couple of years, right before I created Purely Salem, I lived in London. My partner got the opportunity to do his job over in London for a couple of years. So I went with him, obviously, and I didn't have a job originally. So I walked around just taking pictures of London all day so I could show him kind of what he was missing while he was working, but also just because I had nothing else to do. And during that time, I posted those same pictures that I was taking all day onto my social media pages, and everybody loved them. Probably because it was London. We also did a lot of traveling at the time. And so we traveled all over Europe because it was just easy to do there. And again, we posted those pictures and they were always very well received. So when I came back to Salem, I kind of did the same thing with Salem. I love Salem. I love where we live. This picture here is taken on Federal Street, which is my street. And when I posted them on my personal social media pages, they didn't get quite the reception that my pictures from London got. People really weren't interested. The people that I have in my friend group were not from Salem. A couple of them are, and my family's not from Salem originally. So they didn't quite care about the pictures that I was posting. So this picture, as with others, they didn't go over too well. And actually, a couple of my nieces and nephews would actually say, well, why are you posting so many pictures of Salem? So I decided that I would create a page just for Salem called Purely Salem, where I could post pictures and for like-minded people who love Salem as much as me. And it worked. I would use like the Salem hashtags, the Salem MA or the Salem Massachusetts hashtags. And so the people that wanted to look at Salem pictures could find my page. And funny story about this picture though, I like about a year and a half later reposted it on my Purely Salem page, and nobody liked it there either. So really, it just wasn't a great picture apparently. But I included it in this presentation anyway because I like it. Okay, so the next picture that I have is actually my profile picture. It is the first puddle picture that I took, probably still my favorite, and it's of the Ropes Mansion, which is one of my favorite structures in Salem, probably everybody's. It's just a perfectly proportioned building, and I happened upon this puddle, which reflected it sort of perfectly. There was a lot going on in this puddle, so I wanted to capture the house the way that, so I could show as much of the house as I could and maybe a little bit of the fence. You can kind of see in the bottom of the picture that there was some like grass and leaves and stuff in the puddle. So it was kind of making it a little bit difficult. So I was there for quite a while actually trying to take this picture. And I didn't notice that there was a car coming up the street behind me. So obviously if there's a puddle here, there's puddles elsewhere too. There's a puddle right outside of the curb, right in the street. And this is, if when I'm standing here, I'm on Cambridge Street, which is a pretty narrow street. And so anyways, I was there and sure enough, I got totally soaked by a car that passed by and splashed me in the puddle. So that was annoying and I was kind of frustrated. And I was also frustrated because all the water that came from the street went into my puddle and then the puddle was moving around. So I hadn't quite gotten the shot yet. So I had to wait for the puddle to calm down again. So as I was taking the puddle picture again, I heard a car and it was the same car. So I was really kind of annoyed because this person now that just splashed me came back around. It seemed like they were doing it on purpose. But actually, they stopped their car and they realized after the fact, after they turned the corner, that they had splashed me. So they went all the way around the block just to come back to apologize to me for splashing me. So it made me think better about humanity all over again. But this picture is probably my favorite, or certainly my first puddle picture, and probably my favorite, which is why I use it as my profile picture. So that's that picture. So one of my favorite things to do is walk around in a snowstorm. And I will go out like mid-snowstorm and I'll spend hours out there. It's for starters, there's no cars in the street because there's no emergency, which is always the best. And typically, if it's cold out, people have their fireplaces going, so you can smell like the wood burning fireplace in the air. And it's just a really neat, just a neat time when it really makes Salem feel like probably what it would have been, when these houses were built a couple hundred years ago. So this specific picture I like because, this is Chestnut Street. There are houses down the whole street, but because there's so much snow in the trees and there's just so much snow kind of in the air, it really almost appears like this house is by itself on a long country road. Obviously it's not, but I really like getting that sense that you're kind of isolated. You're walking around. You can't really hear much in a snowstorm. It's just it's my favorite time to walk around Salem, and I do it quite a bit. I'm very cold and very wet by the time we get back, but it's definitely my favorite time to go out and take pictures. So I wanted to include a snow picture. So this picture was my first attempt at a drone picture. Got a drone as a present, and I went to the Ropes Mansion Garden, of course, to take a picture because that's one of my favorite spots in the city. It's absolutely beautiful, and it was in pretty good bloom here. So I thought that would be ideal. But I didn't really know how to use the drone, and also I was just overall kind of scared of it. So the controls that I had on my phone, and then the sound that the drone makes. The drone's like really loud, and it has this noise. It just sounds like it's gonna like take off and like go far away, and I won't be able to control it. Meanwhile, I'm standing next to the Ropes Mansion, and if ever like my drone hit the Ropes Mansion, I would feel so bad. So this lasted for all of maybe 5 minutes. You can see my partner and I over in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture, trying to control the drone. And I just got so freaked out by it. We landed the drone and we got out of there. So this picture came out of it, but I didn't actually try using the drone again until I got a new drone recently. And so far I have used that one once. So drones aren't necessarily for me. I think they're scary, but they're fun. This is a fun picture. I got there, at sunset time, and you can actually see this was obviously taken a couple of years ago, because you can, if you follow kind of what's going on in Salem, that carriage house, which is kind of in the top middle of the screen there, which is missing its roof, or the roof kind of caved in. This picture is now gone. It has now been demolished, which is sad. You can kind of tell why from this shot. And I actually you couldn't really tell that in person, not until I looked at these pictures that I got from the drone could I really actually see that the thing caved in. So it's sad that that's missing, but anyways, it's a fun shot. So next up is this park here is on Chestnut Street. It's a private park on Chestnut Street, though the gate's always open. And we were walking down the street, just kind of walking down Chestnut as kind of our normal walk route for the night. And from Hamilton Hall, which is across the street from this park, a large grouping of people, all dressed like this, just started to run across the street and into the park. So we tried to figure out what was going on. It was just very random. Obviously, we had no background as to the event or everything. And in the middle of this, it's not in the picture, but there's a person with a sword who actually like breaks open a champagne bottle with a sword, and they're toasting something. But it was just a kind of a neat thing to stumble upon when you're walking around Salem. And I really feel like that actually happens quite a bit, certainly more so around Halloween time. You never really know what you're going to find in Salem, and it's kind of all just accepted and just, yep, it's Salem. So anyways, it was really kind of neat to get to see it and see everybody in these old period costumes in front of, this is 8 Chestnut Street here, and in front of 8 Chestnut. Fortunately, during this time of year, you could actually see the house because there were no leaves. But I really thought that seeing those old period costumes in front of the the antique house was pretty neat. And by the way, that 8 Chestnut is one of my favorite houses in all of Salem. I think it's the only house in Salem that is like kind of situated sideways from the street. There was another house, I think, on the corner of Watts Court, but they changed the doorway to be on Chestnut because it was cool to have a Chestnut Street address. But this house here is, I think, one of the only ones that's sideways facing. I love it. All right. So next up is the witch house. And, as Ty said, it is very, very hard to get a picture of the witch house. As he mentioned, you can't really you have to kind of get far away from it. If you can't get too far away from it, then you're left with a shot like this, which is kind of an upward facing shot. And certainly during Halloween season, and certainly when there's pumpkins on the front lawn, there is just a stream of people ready to get their picture taken in front of that door. So this picture was actually taken in between, a grouping of people that had just left and another one walking out. But that's kind of the only way to do it at this time. But this picture is actually one of my most liked pictures. I think it's the pumpkin. I had thought maybe after this, I would just walk around with the pumpkin and put it in front of all of my pictures for the season, but I didn't do that. I might still in the future, I'm not sure. So at any rate, yeah, it's tough in all parts of Salem during Halloween time, but really even during the entire year. If you wanted to take a picture of some of our more popular buildings, there's going to be a grouping of tourists in front of that building, or maybe even a whole walking tour, and you're going to have a tough time taking a picture of that building. So I was grateful to get this picture. I probably have only posted the witch house maybe 5 or 6 times, and it's most of the reason it's kind of hard to get it. It's similar with a few other properties around, like the Ropes Mansion. So next up, this is Harmony Grove Cemetery, and I go over there oftentimes in the fall and oftentimes during Halloween season when Salem is very busy. And I love Halloween, and I actually love to be in Salem at Halloween time. I'm not one of those residents that gets annoyed by it, but occasionally it is nice to have a quiet place to go and just kind of walk around. As Amelia said, this is like one of our parks. I use this as a park. I go over there and walk around, and it is such a beautiful cemetery. On this specific day, obviously, I found this amazing tree that was kind of bright yellow, had just dropped all of its leaves around it, and everything else around it was kind of still green. But I was very fortunate to get this shot. But all of Harmony Grove, you can kind of go there throughout the seasons and always find beauty. It's always relatively quiet. It's pretty much my favorite place to walk. Unfortunately, now that we have a dog, we don't get to go to Harmony Grove quite as much because dogs aren't allowed at Harmony Grove. But Green Lawn Cemetery, which is also in Salem, does allow dogs and is almost as beautiful. I definitely like Harmony Grove better, but certainly during the month of October, I actually spend quite a bit of time in the cemetery on the weekends just walking around. I find it a nice, relaxing place. So here is my House of the Seven Gables picture, and it's actually not, the House of Seven Gables is actually not included in this picture, but this tree here that I took a picture of is on the House of the Seven Gables property. And it's one of my favorite trees in the city, and perhaps it's just because it was left to grow. A lot of the trees in the city have been taken down because, you know, people fear that they're going to fall on houses, or have been cut into odd shapes because of the power lines. I know myself, the two trees that were in front of my house, when I bought the house, one of them had already fallen down, and while I lived here, the other one fell into the street. So I now have two little trees in front of my house. But that happened because the power lines, they were cutting the power lines, they're cutting the tree for the power lines, and then the branches, it wasn't meant to live that way, and it fell. So this tree here, I just absolutely love that it's kind of was left to be big and beautiful. And I've taken a few pictures from different angles of it, but I like this one because I like, you know, how it's kind of above the historic structures here. And it just kind of, I think, works. It's very kind of moody. The sky's a little bit moody. I really love, yeah, it's actually one of my favorite things on the House of the Seven Gables property is this tree. So I wanted to make sure I included it here today. So this picture here, I wouldn't say it's one of my best pictures or whatever, but one of my favorite days in Salem is the 4th of July. I know Salem is Halloween focused, but on the 4th of July, it's actually just kind of a special day where the entire community gets together. You know, we all go down to the wharf, not this past year, but in prior years. And, you know, it's just a great vibe. We have the music playing, and people in general are just happy to be there. It's literally one of my favorite days. What my actual favorite part is walking home from this. The fireworks everything went off, and then you're walking home, you have your chairs, you have everything, but people are walking in the street kind of just away. It feels like you live in this quiet, quaint little town. For whatever reason, people seem to walk in the streets during that time. There aren't cars. It's just a neat time. I would say, you know, whenever anybody asked me when to come to Salem, I obviously would say, well, you probably should experience Salem during Halloween time. But I would always give a shout out to the 4th of July, because I really think it's one of our most special days. And I think we do it better than most other cities around. I hope we get to do it again as normal sometime in the near future. So this picture, I just posted this past year. Obviously, I took the picture because of the beautiful tree out in front of the house on Essex Street here. And I took the picture because I couldn't really tell what was going on here. There was nobody around. There were just these bags of leaves, and nobody working on the bags of leaves, and obviously still a lot of leaves left. So either the leaves arrived after they already bagged them up, or they ran out of bags. So I kind of made a joke about that in my post, like, I think these people are going to need new bags. And I never really think about the fact that, you know, whoever lives in that house is looking at my post. I kind of just don't think about that. Well, they actually then put a comment saying, yeah, we had to go out and get new bags. We ran out of bags. And then the person's mother chimed in that they were going to give me bags. So I felt really bad about this. Like, I made them feel bad about the fact that they hadn't cleaned up all of their leaves. So this picture here was just, it was a wake-up call for me that I should probably realize that people are actually looking at my pictures. But it's a beautiful, obviously, tree anyway. And I actually thought that the leaves out front were kind of fun. But anyway, so this was just a wake-up call for me, which is why I included it today. When I first started my page, I was definitely focused on finding the coolest guys out there. And on this particular day, it was in the cemetery, that's Broad Street Cemetery, and the sky kept on getting kind of cooler and cooler. So I was probably there for about a half hour. You know, it started out just a little bit pink, and then it eventually got like this. So I stayed there for quite a bit of time, which I would probably do anyway, and I got this cool shot. So I don't really have not too much of a story to go with that picture, other than the fact that I just liked it. So I don't feel like it would have been appropriate for me to have this presentation and not include a picture of the Hocus Pocus house. As Ty was saying, it's really it's an amazing little jewel box of a house. I do like walking around in the snow, so I made sure to get over there in the snowstorm, though it's not close to my house, so I probably drove. But anyways, I did take this picture, and I just really loved how you kind of almost couldn't tell where the horizon line was. It was actually snowing at the time. The water was like a cool green, which it normally isn't actually, and it just had a really, really neat winter vibe. And it made the house isn't overly isolated. There's a house right next door. But from this perspective, it really just kind of looks like it's by itself there. And actually, I get a lot of comments whenever I post the Hocus Pocus house, a lot of people don't realize, because from the movie, it doesn't really show it as on the water. I mean, if you really watch the movie, it does at one point. But in general, a lot of people thought, and I probably would have as well, that it was not on the water. So they're surprised to see it like this, right on the water like that. But it's one of my favorite houses in Salem for sure, and so I had to include it in my slides today. So this picture here, I like reflection pictures, as everybody knows. And so this picture here, we had a visiting ship in, and I wanted to make sure to get a picture of it. I think I was over on the other side. I walked all the way down the wharf, and I decided, stupidly, that I should jump down into what I didn't think was mud. I thought it wasn't mud. Like I didn't think my sneakers would get buried in that mud, but it is in fact mud. So I jumped down in there, which was probably like, I don't know, an 8-foot drop or so. And I had new sneakers on, but I needed to get this picture. So I got the picture, but then I had to like climb up the wall to get back up onto the wharf area. And in the process of doing so, I lost the lens that I used to get said picture. And obviously I ruined my sneakers, but I did really like the picture that resulted from it. I think actually, Hello Salem caught me doing that, which is embarrassing. But
we were there at the same time. Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, so I had to get new sneakers out of the deal. I had to get a new lens, but I really love, when anything like this comes to Salem, when we have this visiting ship here, or anything exciting happens to Salem, I really love to check it out, and also to share it so that people who aren't from Salem, or who don't really get to, maybe who didn't make it down here, get to see it. So at any rate. So this picture here is also of 8 Chestnut. So I already showed you 8 Chestnut. It was right next to the garden. It is one of my favorite pictures. One of my favorite houses in Salem. Part of the reason why I've included it again. And this is one of my, typical puddle pictures that I like to post. I really do like finding the reflections in the puddles. But the reason why I'm actually sharing this one today is actually to give a shout out to my partner. So puddles, taking a picture in a puddle doesn't work if it's raining, because there's a lot of little drops on the puddle then, and you can't get the proper reflection. The picture's all distorted. So on this day and on other occasions, my partner has held a big golf umbrella up over the puddle to make sure that there was actually no drops on the puddle, so I could take the picture. So I included this one to give him a shout out. Many people might not know that that's something that I would have to do in order to get one of these puddle pictures, but I did. And my partner has an awful lot of patience with me and the Purely Salem page. And last but not least for me, I like to use my page to try and support the local businesses, or at least give them a shout out, or in this case here, just put them in a picture, tag them in it, just to get people to try and support local. Certainly that was very important this past year. So I wanted to, this is probably one of my more favorite pictures that I've taken on the Walking Mall. And I love the little Wicked Good bookstore. I love the bookstore that was there before, with all the books that would fall over if you walked in the store. But I wanted to kind of put this as my last one to make sure that everyone continues to support local, and which is what we're doing, which is what everyone that's on here today is doing, to support the House of Seven Gables, which is a really important thing. So that's it for me. I am done.
That was awesome for the three of you. I know I am entertained and inspired. Matt, I literally laughed out loud because I had one time I took my son down to the wharf and kind of was like, yeah, go ahead. Like, you can go off the edge. It's low enough tide, and same thing. It was just ankle deep muck, and I should have known better. So I can picture the adult version climbing out as well. I also wanted to let you know too that the tree that you're talking about that's on our historic site is actually an American elm tree. And what makes the tree even more amazing and special is the fact that it survived the Dutch elm disease crisis of kind of the 30s and 40s too. Why and how it did, probably proximity to other elm trees that might have been in the area, and for some reason it just grazed by this tree. But that's what makes it even more unique and special, is that the tree, I think, is probably about 150 years old or so, last I knew. And really amazing that it survived a major kind of tree-borne illness that killed off thousands upon thousands of trees in the New England area. So you can feel even more special taking
Yeah.
that picture
Very
now.
good.
And then we had one comment as well, is that you should rename your page if Instagram will let you. Adventures in Photography, how far you go for the perfect shot. Doesn't quite capture the Salem, but it's certainly there as well. So our attendees, you are welcome to, if you'd like to restart your videos, you're welcome to do so. You're welcome to leave them off. If you have any questions, I see some coming in, and I'm certainly going to be passing those along to you folks as well. But you're welcome to throw questions in Q&A. Kaylee and I are going to take care of managing those and kind of passing those along as well. Also wanted to let you know too, we have somebody who just messaged us. So I said we had people from across the country. We actually have somebody joining us from Ireland tonight too. And she says, Salem plays an important role in her college work, and her degree next year will be based on Salem. She really enjoyed this, and that was great. So we've gone international, everybody, and that's fantastic. So one of the first questions that we kind of had out to ask is from Anne, and she wants to know what each of you take your pictures on. Do you use a cell phone, DSLR combination, or what? So.
I guess I'll go ahead, Matt.
Go ahead. No, I was saying who wants to go first. Please go first.
I would say I do have a semi-professional camera, but I don't consider myself a professional photographer. Most of my personal photographs are with a phone on my morning runs. I think that unless you're looking for a specific shot, and there are people who certainly line up and they're professionals and they look for a special shot, I think you get more, at least from my perspective, you get more if it's spur of the moment and it's the right light at the right time, or the right person in the shot, or there's like we said, the car has passed by, or the tourist has moved on. I think that the phone allows you to do that a lot easier for me.
Yeah, I agree. I have a DSLR camera. Typically, I only use it when traveling. And like Ty said, you have to like set up a shot. You can't really do that while walking around Salem. Oftentimes you'll walk by something and say, hey, that's cool. And you only have your iPhone or whatever camera phone you use. But if you were, and also the other thing is to lug around your camera with you, just, going to dinner or doing whatever you're doing, that would be kind of a pain. So often, I think some of the pictures on my page have been taken with an actual camera, but probably 98% of them have been taken with my iPhone.
Same thing. I only use my iPhone because it's always on me. Again, I'm sure Matt and Ty feel inspired, spur of the moment. You're just trying to walk somewhere and something catches your eye and you just always have your phone on you. So it's definitely a lot easier to do it that way.
Yeah.
Great. And then Patty wanted to know, how long have you each been taking pictures?
So I started in Salem 2014. I forgot to point out earlier that I think Amelia was the first person that I saw, at least on. So I don't think there was much of an Instagram community happening in Salem when I got here in 2014. And she was one of the few that I saw that was out doing that kind of thing and hashtag Salem Mass. And she mentioned the Doors of Salem thing. That's something I shamelessly stole that from her early on and saw her tagging those things and showing those photos. But yeah, I think things have changed as far as like the amount of people out taking photographs of Salem. It's changed a lot over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I've always liked to take pictures, but I didn't really take pictures to post, like I said, until I lived in London and I had nothing else to do but take pictures. And then I kind of wanted to take more unique pictures while I was there because, again, just for something to do. So I brought that back to Salem, but that was really just when I kind of started this page. I didn't really take too many pictures and post them before that.
I've been taking photos just my whole life. Even when I was younger, I always had a point and shoot or a disposable camera. I just always really enjoyed it. But I did take a few photography courses in high school and college. But again, I joined Instagram, I want to say in 2013, and that really gave me a place to put all of these random photos from my walks, especially around Salem. There's so many interesting things to see. But that's when I started posting them on Instagram.
Awesome. And Danny says, thank you all so much for taking time out to present today. I find all of your photos so beautiful and interesting. So, her first kind of question, I'll ask the first one, and I'll ask her second one is, how did you get started in photography, and did you take any special courses?
So I never took any courses in photography. I'm a political science major. I just got started by taking thousands upon thousands of photos with my phone, and never only posting the best of those. But I think for me, it was when I first moved to just outside of Boston, I started taking some photos early on. I think it's just practice. You get to the point where I'm sure a lot of people, because there's so many people out taking photos, where you just see an image and you see what that's going to look like as a photograph, and you can your mind can sort of create that. And I think there's a lot of practice that goes into that just by walking around and taking photos.
Yeah, I agree. Like practice actually, I have on my iPhone right now, there's 105,000 pictures actually. And each time I take a picture, I take like 40 or 50 to try. And then I go back and I look at it, and they all look pretty much the same. There's like something that's slightly off that only I could probably even tell if I can. But you do that, you try and then see, or you crop it in certain ways and try and see what you think looks the best. But it's a kind of a trial and error type of thing. And then you can also, with Instagram, if you post something and it doesn't get a good reception, then that doesn't work. So you can kind of given the feedback that you get, you kind of can see what works and what doesn't work.
As I mentioned, I did take a couple of photography courses in high school and college. But again, I also have the same habit of taking multiple shots of the same thing, just so I can pick the right one. I've tried to get better about that, but I also use filters and maybe like the clone tool to get out. If there's something in my image that I don't want to be there, sometimes I will clone it out to sort of make the image that I want.
And that was actually going to be the next question, Amelia. So a couple people wanted to ask if each of you use filters or any other special tools. Are there any filters that you like in particular?
I guess we're going in order here. I use Snapseed just to, typically I just like to, if I'm trying to tell a story with a certain photograph, or I'm trying to highlight an architectural element or something about the photo that I want to sort of bring forward, particularly with brightness. So like if I'm taking a picture of a brick building with a white entryway, I may want to bring out some of the details in that entryway that may not be visible in the photo. So I might just go in and brighten that up a little bit. I use Snapseed I have a Pixel phone, so I use Snapseed on that to edit typically. But I don't use any preset filters or anything like that. I just like to sort of bring forward some saturation and brightness in a photo.
That's my turn. I actually also use Snapseed. I like Snapseed a lot. Oftentimes you can adjust kind of the crispness of certain parts of a picture, which is pretty handy. I don't really use too many of the filters. When I first started, I definitely used the Instagram filters, but I don't do that quite as much anymore. But I do also use an app called Afterlight, which just kind of sometimes provides a little bit of like, it can provide like maybe a hint of like pink hue to the picture if it was like a really gray day, or really the picture looked really cold and that wasn't what I was going for. I will use those.
So I also use Snapseed. I really like to use it for bringing out richness or details in a photo, like playing with the levels. If I want to do a filter that's more moody or retro or like creepy looking, I'll either use the app PixArt or Lightroom.
Awesome. Wayne wanted to know if you have any favorite photographers that you follow, and I guess connected to that, do you have any favorite Instagrammers that you follow as well?
I mean, I follow both of the other photographers on here, and I appreciate both of their work because they're both very different. Honestly, I'm very Salem centric in what I follow and what I see. I'm sure there's more sophisticated answers that I could give, but these two on here, Jen Ratliff is one that I follow, who's very interested in history and posts about it frequently. Spellbound Salem is another one that I think does a great job. But I think just following the Salem hashtag is very interesting, because there are people moving into Salem, moving out of Salem frequently, and you see people come in and you're like, I've never seen this person before, and they have an interesting, particularly if it's somebody who's new to Salem, they have an interesting perspective on Salem that I think if you live here, you may sort of take things for granted, and it's refreshing to see people who do it from perspective.
Yeah, I'm the same. I typically do follow. I follow all that Salem hashtag, and so I don't. I mean, I follow like 900 people, and so there's probably quite a few in there that that I could give a shout out to. Certainly, the 2 people that are on the panel, I follow, and I enjoy their pictures. But I think in general, I like to see also just pictures of Salem that people that I don't know take, to see kind of a fresh perspective. So I don't necessarily have a favorite, photographer in general, like a world photographer that I could name. But I guess I kind of like to see the local stuff myself. So.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I follow Matt and Ty. I think they're a good representation for good photography in Salem. And again, I find a lot of accounts through the Salem hashtag and through like my interests. So like if I'm looking for architecture hashtag, then I find different accounts that way. I can't think of any names right now, and I'm sorry on the spot, but I will use hashtags a lot, and location tags to find different photographers.
Yeah, I follow a lot of houses, so it's not even a person, it's like their house.
Yep.
And I follow a lot of those. I'm actually oftentimes probably not sure who the actual photographer is.
I love that people have added kind of personality to their architecture. I want to say it might be called the Groggy Anchor, and I think it's a Provincetown-based bed and breakfast and historic house. But everything is from the perspective of the house, not necessarily the owners of it. And I think it's really neat to be able to have those, almost like conversations with architecture,
Yeah.
Conversations with a house is really great. So we had Jamie who asked, Salem architecture and cemetery art got mentioned a lot. Can anyone recommend any good books that delve more into Salem's history in those regards? Ty's going right for the bookshelf.
This is, and I think I see Matt post about this a lot. So this is Architecture in Salem by Bryant Tolles. I actually met Bryant Tolles 2 years ago. He was at a historic Salem event. This is like, it goes house by house in here. And I'm not someone who has an architecture background. So I think when you read about the elements of a house and what Bryant Tolles appreciates about these houses in Salem, it makes you walk by the house and be like, I see that now. I'm looking at that now. I'm looking at that that doorway or that window. So that's a big one. As far as history, I don't know. There's also a Mary Harrod Northend is an author from I think the early 20th century, and she's written about Salem. She's written about Salem doorways. That's an interesting one to follow. But there's a lot of Jean Stella actually wrote a book recently. She's a Salem resident, where she went street by street in Salem. And I find that, it's probably super nerdy, but I find that very, very interesting when she talks about why a street got a certain name or what happened on this street. And I think I'm very tied to like the location of a spot, and knowing, even if it's a parking lot today, just knowing what happened on that corner at some point in history. I really enjoyed reading that book. And you can read that like just one, you can pick it up and look at it and say, I'm just interested in seeing what happened on this street. But yeah, there's a lot out there. It's for a small city, there's a lot written about Salem, and it's very, there's a lot to find for sure.
I'm with Ty. The Tolles book was my Bible, certainly walking around. Actually, my partner digitized it for me, so I have it on my phone. So as I'm walking around, I can kind of just search for something, as I'm walking by a house or whoever, to see if it's in there. But I really, that's probably the thing that I use the most. That, and also just the house histories, the historic Salem Inc. house histories. You can see the plaque on the house, but there's a lot more information behind it if you go to their site.
I definitely have a couple books on architecture, cemeteries. I have a few Salem-centric books, like the Salem Then and Now. I'm drawing blanks on specific names, but I can make a post. I can gather those books and make a post about it.
Robert Booth's Death of an Empire actually is very, it's interesting the way he tells the story of Salem's history. It's very, it's a more dramatic, I guess, telling, or a more epic style telling of the story, which is, I enjoyed that one also.
That, and I would recommend for architecture, I kind of have a go-to that surprisingly is not in my office, but I do have it at home, and it's the Field Guide to American Houses. So kind of no matter where you live, the architecture in Salem is phenomenal for local architecture. And again, total agreement on that one. But the Field Guide to American Houses is really helpful. It breaks houses down by the region of the country, and then it breaks it down into time periods. If you are local to New England, the Historic New England website, and I believe the Peabody Essex Museum website both also have online architecture guides that are fantastic on-the-go resources for learning more about architecture. And there's some really great work done, like Amelia mentioned the Salem Then and Now series. The Images of America books, there are two of those about Salem written by Ken Torino, who's with Historic New England. And a few years ago, our staff put out an Images of America about the House of the Seven Gables as well. So it's a nice kind of short, quick bite of history with a lot of great photography and images in those as well. So if you really like a mix of photography and history, the Images of America books are fantastic resources too. So that's great. Thank you, everybody. We had, Anne has another question too for everybody. Have you ever asked someone to move their car? I often think, get that car out of my puddle.
I would love to frequently. I think that says, I won't get overly political, but I think that says something about the problem we have with cars in America, is that there's this a couple times a year when we do street sweeping that just looks incredibly, and the city is much more beautiful without cars, I think, parked on the sidewalk, but that's a whole other discussion probably. But I think that this it's a rare thing. Like, I think Amelia posted that picture of Graymore, and I have tried to take that picture 1,000 times. There's always a car parked in front of that, and you're like, if not for this car, I could take it. This could be an incredible shot. But there are times when a car can also be interesting in a shot too, because if somebody has a little red car or something that sort of just interestingly contrasts with the house, that can be interesting as well. A bicycle is great to have in a photo if you ever get that chance in front of a house. But usually a minivan like my own parked in front of a house is probably not going to make it more attractive.
Yeah, I've never asked anybody to move a car, but I certainly have stalked a car until it did move. Just kind of hung out. And also I have held a place with my own car. If I wanted to take something at a certain time, I have put my car in a spot and then just moved it when it was time to take the picture. So I've done that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I've never asked anyone to move a car, but there have been times when people see me trying to get a shot of something, whether they're standing there or in a car, and they're like, oh, am I in your way? And I'm like, don't worry about it. And then they move their car or body anyway, because they can see what I'm trying to do. Or like Matt said, you just have to sort of come back around, like maybe wait 10 minutes and come back around, see if they moved. Just wait for it.
That's awesome. So a lot of you talk about seasonality in your work too, and kind of, like loving pictures at different times. And again, as somebody who, even just here at the Gables, I manage our Instagram page here at the Gables, and I feel like there's no bad season to take pictures at our historic site. But I personally love winter, so I personally love taking winter pictures here at the Gables. But I'm really curious, what is your very favorite season to capture here in Salem?
Well, this is not what you asked, but my least favorite is, it tends to actually be winter, but I think that it creates more interesting photos sometimes. So it's not as easy because it's gross. Like in January, it's not even like, it's not beautiful snow. It's just brown and dark colored dirty snow that's all over the place, and there's no leaves in the trees. And but it does, I think, force you to see details a little bit more sharply. And I think that I tend to take photographs of like a doorknob or of some interesting architectural detail, or just something that maybe I hadn't seen before. And I think you have to work a little bit harder in the wintertime. And I think that it's sometimes more rewarding to take photos at times when it's the most difficult. but the answer is probably November, like the first week of November. I think the first week of November is peak. Like people think of October in Salem as being the time. I think the first week of November is when the leaves on the common and most leaves throughout the city hit their peak. And there's not porta potties to take to take pictures around. There's not tourists all over the place. It's Salem as you would imagine it.
Yeah, I enjoy probably winter and fall. Like Amelia said, in the winter you can get pictures of the buildings without the leaves. So that actually does make a big difference if you like taking pictures of buildings. But the light might not be as good, but you can also get some pretty dramatic lighting in the winter as well. Fall, obviously in Salem, those pictures have a tendency, we get decorations, and so Salem it's fun in the fall if you like to have crowds in your pictures, but for life, not meaning just to show life. Then obviously fall is the time to probably do that in Salem. And I love the pictures of the foliage, so probably fall first and then winter for me.
Yeah, I would have to say fall is my absolute favorite, because in early fall you have the foliage changing on the trees, and then as Ty mentioned, into November you have them on the ground, which creates a sort of new landscape to photograph. And that is probably the most challenging season to take photos because of tourism. There's a lot of traffic happening. But other than that, I really enjoy spring because the blooms are just so beautiful.
Great, and we had one person who had a hand up. So let me just see if I can find Linda really quick. There we go. Linda, I've asked you to unmute. You are welcome to ask your question.
Yes, a question for all of them. Are any of them thinking of publishing a book of their photos in the future? Is that a dream? Because you have so much talent, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I think Linda's personally asked me this question many times, and I would love to at some point. I struggle with finding the time to even research how that. I'm sure that it's to find out how that would even be done, or how to dedicate the time to that to make sure that was quality. But I would love to at some point. Just I don't think right now is the time for me.
Yeah, I'm a perfectionist, and so even the pictures that I post on my page, half of the time I'm like, I shouldn't have posted that. So I can't imagine that I'd ever get to a point where I'd be able to assemble pictures for a book and be okay with whatever I've assembled. So I certainly have no plans to do one right now, but maybe sometime. I don't know.
Yeah, publishing a book is something I've never considered. I think I have the same issue that Matt does, where I'll post something and I'm like, oh, I should have tweaked that, or like, why did I choose that? And you start overthinking everything, and I don't think I could handle a book.
Maybe as a Gables fundraiser, we could all do one.
There you go.
Yeah, a group.
We've got a great graphic designer who's on our team. So, hey, maybe we can certainly think about something. And somebody in the chat said, do a Kickstarter. I'd support it. So never say never. Down the road, it's all possible. Well, I don't see any other questions from the crowd. So I definitely wanted to take a moment, and everybody is saying, oh, I love this idea. Book is a fundraiser. Yes. So, so maybe we had a good tone with that. So I would like to say thank you so much on behalf of the Gables to Ty Hapworth, Amelia Krupetsky, and Matt Obie, who respectively are Hello Salem, Frost_Oath, and Purely Salem on Instagram. So please follow along with them. Enjoy their work, enjoy their beautiful takes on Salem. I hope you all learned a little bit more about what inspires them tonight. I know I'm ready to run out at the historic site right now and even look at all of our buildings and our landscapes a little bit differently. And Kaylee has already said that she's downloaded all of the apps you suggested. So we're both going to have a lot of fun on our Instagram, thanks to you. Also, thank you to Kaylee from the Gables for helping out with the background logistics. Zoom certainly takes a village, and we appreciate the help. Thank you to everybody who joined us tonight and who donated as a part of this program. You're really helping with our recovery efforts here at the House of the Seven Gables. We're looking forward to a much brighter 2021, and thanks to programs like this, it's certainly in place. We appreciate it. And also a big thank you to all of our members who joined us tonight as well. So nice to see you online and hopefully in person soon. We will be sending a follow-up email to all of our attendees. You'll be able to follow tonight's speakers on Instagram, join our email list. You could make a last-minute donation. We'll never say no to that. And we will also try to get a recording up on YouTube as soon as possible and share that too. I know a few people mentioned in the chat they had some personal issues with either sound or screens or whatnot. So we'll look forward to sharing this talk with everybody. And the follow-up email will also have a link to our online event calendar. So in June, you can check out a live food demonstration, or you can actually join Nathaniel Hawthorne and Henry David Thoreau for an online conversation at the end of the month. So we've got lots of great stories coming your way, lots of great things at the Gables. Thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. I can't wait to continue liking your work, both as Seven Gables and myself. So thank you so much. And we will look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great night, everybody, and happy spring.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.